Allez-y, hein, parce que...
Bienvenue au spectacle.
Alors, ma lumière, elle monte.
Tu sais qui a dessiné les trous?
Alors, ma lumière, elle monte en 3 secondes, et toutes les autres qui descendent, elles descendent pour certaines en 15, c'est-à-dire les chocolats en 15 secondes et les rattrapes de face en 15 secondes.
I'm Jorge Crecis, I'm associate artist here at Déda, and I'm normally a choreographer and internationally teaching, whatever they call me.
I'm Jean-Daniel Brousse. I'm a circus artist, so I'm working with Nikki and JD, and part of a Berlin methodical group as well. And we are associate artists at Déda.
Yeah, and I'm Nikki. We've been working together about 3.5 years now, so
I'm Phil Hargreaves, the associate producer here at Déda. I work with Stephen on the programme, and I'm also a freelance producer for dance artists. No, I have to do the circus.
Good, and
yeah.
Rachel.
Can you hear all right?
Should we go forward?
Struggling a bit. Can we all move forward then a bit?
And maybe you come forward too, because it's better, the acoustics are better over
Are we going to block you?
Under 6 inches, so maybe a foot. That's lovely.
Wow.
It does sound swimming because the first outcome of this is the acoustic panels for this room. I think that's the main thing. Just kind of kick it off and open to questions, but I think the thing for me, you know, it is a kind of pet niggle. It is the thing about narrative development, story in dance and in circus, and the whole thing about the trick, the applause, the interaction of the audience, the narrative development within a piece of circus and dance. So I just want to start with the artists and Jorge maybe, just in terms of what differentiates a piece of dance circus and does it really matter to the artist in terms of that creative process?
I was thinking about that question. Stephen sent me the questions a few days ago to start thinking, and I was thinking, at the end of the day, we all go on a stage or in front of an audience for a reason, and I think that reason is either to entertain, which is totally fine, or to inspire. And the medium might be very, very different in terms of vocabularies or genres or mediums. But at the end of the day, as artists, we share that goal, and I think that is what unifies us, and from that core we diversify. In terms of circus and dance, I think the main difference, what I was thinking, is about the skills, the movement vocabulary, which for me, it comes to the idea of a few years ago when hip-hop started to be a very big thing in terms of the contemporary and mainstream theaters, and how that new vocabulary became a bit more contemporary meaning what it's been doing now. And I think that Circus is approaching that idea here in the UK, as Rachel was saying, not that long ago, but in France or Belgium, it happened many, many years ago when I was dancing there. I remember my first contact was through Roberto Olivan, who was teaching at ESAC in Belgium, and the crossover between dance and circus there was immediate. We are talking about 15, 20 years ago. So I just think that it's about different vocabularies coming together, and what interests me personally as a dance artist between circus and dance is I have the feeling that circus can bring physicality and skills that in dance we don't have. Okay. And in dance I think we can bring a direction that we have through many years of experience directing on a stage. So kind of like you have this French word metteur en scène, which is kind of like what in dance we've been practicing for many years. Choreographers, I think, less and less we devise movement, we put things together. So I think that crossover could be really, really interesting in that sense for me.
No, thank you. And just to continue that with Nikki and JD and the work that you've been doing with Ben Duke. Ben Duke's a really interesting character. He trained at London Contemporary Dance School, and as you say, went through what was the name of the program? The last Blender program. And now he's working with quite a lot of circus artists, and he's working with you. And I just wonder, him coming from a dance background, what he brings to the table for you guys as circus artists.
Gosh, I mean, feeling like he's a dance. He comes from a dance background is interesting because he's so strong in looking at narrative, and that always feels like the motivating force in working with him. And so it's not at all like when we've worked with the choreographers, say one that we know called Martin Corey, who he worked with NDT for many years. He worked with Bathsheba, and he could create these meticulous choreographies in his head and then teach them to us and then tell us we were doing them all wrong, but that's, that's because of our training. But and then we develop it to something that does suit us. But that's a very different process from someone who comes in with ultimately a sense of what's the story that can come out of the characters in the room. And so that comes through more theatrical improvisations, certainly the way that we worked more with Ben. And I suppose, what's interesting with Circus is that so much of it has been about acts. You've got a cabaret type thing, or you've got a circus tent, and then you've got a compere who ties everything together, and then you've got a bunch of acts. And so if you're trying to create a narrative, sometimes a way to do that is that this compere is the one that is creating the story. So we were in a cabaret where we were lovers, and then we kept finding all of these different people that were challenging our love for each other, and then it would be an act. And then we come back together, and then there's another act. And that's kind of the formula for circus. And because of the disciplines that are involved in circus, it's really difficult to break away from that. So you're looking at something that's just creating a whole, where it's beginning, middle, and end. it's especially difficult if you're combining aerial and groundwork. And where we've worked most successfully is where it's been all ground-based artists that can then create ensemble. You can break away from that, melt into something that turns into an act. But that turning into it makes sense in the context of the group, in the narrative that you're creating together. It's much harder to do when there's a combination of aerial and ground. That's what I would say.
And I mean, you said something interesting the other day when we were talking about circus. Circus it's in the moment, it's in the here, the now, the live. It's about the risk that you said earlier. It's about when you go into a trick. I guess for me, it's that thing of, you know, when the movement does go into a trick, it's that thing about applause, really. It's about it can break the moment quite. And I guess, you know, audiences react differently in different genres in music, classical music, and it doesn't even matter how the audience react in it. Because, you know, in your piece, for example, your new piece called Not Now, you know, there is a spoiler alert. There is the point where where JD comes out basically, and the audience share that JD's gay, and you know it's a moment. But I was thinking that if there was a trick involved in that moment where it's really poignant and suddenly, you know, hand balance happens and everyone does that, the narrative is spoiled. So is it just that when you're making something with a narrative, you're very aware of where you place the tricks, how you get in and out of the tricks, and how that fits with the piece?
But that's why it has to be written.
Right.
I think that it's you know, often I think you could, you know, it's easy to assume that Circus isn't written and there's no dramaturgy, but the successful shows are written and have dramaturg involvement, and you can spot when there isn't some sort of investigation down that line, and it's something that we're at really early days at, I think, and I think that's something that, in terms of thinking about, you know, the future and training, and actually advice that we give to artists is about being able to write it, even if it's in a storyboard and it's not actual words, but it's the, you know, you have to write it, so you've got to know why you're doing it. And I think that the work that is often more successful is work that it has something to say as well. Obviously it's about entertainment, and it is about being able to thrill, and it's about being able to describe and have a narrative. But I also think it's about, if you have something to say, then you need to find a way of saying it. And if you're finding a way of saying it, then that's where you begin with your dramaturgy. It's not, and you don't base it around the tricks. The tricks will be the way of saying it, maybe, but actually the tricks come in later.
In audience terms, you know, I've worked quite a lot with dance in particular, where there's less of the clapping for tricks, because I don't really know if people see dance as a trick, maybe. So I have taught a show that involved live music, and every time there was a section of the live music that finished, depending upon the venue we went to, the crowd went absolutely wild for it. It was literally like a concert. But then if we went to a dance-specific venue where the audience was probably more dance focused, they were very reserved and kind of watched, and it was a bit odd for the performers to experience one night of uplifting crowd wars in between 5 minutes of clapping, and they didn't know what to do themselves, and then the contraction continued, and then the next night everyone was like, ooh. So, I mean, our audiences in terms of how they perceive and see work, so it might be that actually you come here and nobody claps for the tricks, that might be because we've got a set of dance people in to see it, but maybe you go somewhere else, maybe Jackson's Lane, where everyone will love the tricks. It's interesting.
We've definitely
experienced that.
Dance audiences, are very quiet, and more circus-oriented audiences are definitely more keen.
How does it feel for you? Because as a dance artist, I never get claps in the middle of the show. So
I quite like it. But yeah, and then it is about the narrative and whether it breaks the narrative. And I suppose what's interesting with Circus is that it's often very much directed towards the audience. You know, if you do a trick, it's like, look at me.
But I think dance could learn something from that element of it, though.
Yeah,
in terms of the way we maybe don't direct enough of what we make to what the audience physically want to clap at.
Yeah, well, I certainly think you have to be aware of it when you're making work, because to try to ignore it can be putting up a false wall with an audience.
You said
where
it
it's
was like
not
the
warranted.
fourth wall. You talked about the fourth wall.
I think Circus raises some more interesting questions around that fourth wall and where it sits. And certainly the work that I've most enjoyed has played with that. It's played with an interaction with the audience and that expectation of a response, whether that's laughter or that's clapping.
Do you think there always is a fourth wall when do you think that exists?
In my work, most of the times. In my work, what I try to do is to create an experience for the performer as extreme as I can. So, for example, one of my pieces, when we were talking about risk and dance, I had this red flag coming into it because we really like to use risk in dance many times. So my performance of 36, we have 36 bottles of water almost filled up, and they are thrown in catch almost 1,000 times in 20 minutes. So every 1 second is a bottle, so they have to catch it, throw it, risk it, and it's purely dance choreographed. But I always put that wall. It's like they're having an experience, they're having a really, really hard time, and then you're here to be able to see what's happening.
I guess, I quote Ben Duke, so this is not for me. But he talks about that dance, it is like this internal thing, and it's very, if there was no audience, that would still happen, and it's done for themselves. You feel like you're peeping through the peeping holes and watching them. Whereas Circus is kind of directed. We know that there's an audience, and you are kind of waiting. You're doing it for them, so there's a bit of it's much more external and much more like presenting. Yeah. Because and the nowness that you were talking about when you see someone on the three high, you see it's very real and very now that you know that if they fall in front of you, it's going to be painful to watch. And I think there is this sense of it feels really there and now. Whereas dance, sometimes it's hard in Circus to feel like to be in another world and another place where it feels really there, basically. So that risk of broken bones is always very real.
Yes, no, I'm sure it is. Just kind of moving on. I mean, Rachel, I heard you one time we were in I think Ben Duke was there as well. We were at the place and there was a little Q&A going on at a network meeting, and you kind of, I don't know if these were your words, but you seem to intimate that you felt that the dance world is more advanced in its development than the circus sector. And I kind of made me startled because I'm so used to dance being at the bottom of the pile, like theatre and everything above it. And I thought, oh, brilliant, there's someone to watch. And that's been really because it was coming from you, and I was like, God, I just never think of it in that way. Oh, do you?
Well, I think it's about an attitude to an acceptance for an art form. I mean, there is no circus department at the Arts Council, for example. In France and in France and in Belgium, they have a minister of circus in their structure, Arts Council structure. So I suppose it's partly about that in terms of recognition. I mean, we sit in combined arts department. We have occasionally had funding from theatre as well. So it's sort of about that recognition, but it's also about training and the facilities. As I was saying earlier on, La Brèche was the place we were sending people for years to create work. So it's also about, I don't know how many dance development agencies are there, but there's
10.
There's 10. Okay, so at the moment there's no official circus development agency or centre. I mean, there are venues, there are organisations like yourself and like Great Yarmouth and 101 in Newbury that will invite artists. But so I suppose that's partly about the investment. Infrastructure support, and I mean I know that circus artists in terms of producers and backup. I mean we're 5 people in our office and only 2 of us are full time. So, you know, the amount of requests we get every week, every month for artists who want support in terms of helping to write applications, budget, you know, information about how to find partners. You know, we could, if we opened the doors, the floodgates would, you know, but that's why there's not enough producers and organisations to offer that sort of support.
Do you think that that's some of the lack of, I mean, I have a bit of a, you know, agencies I'm not always sure are the best way forward for art forms, speaking controversially. And do you think that keeps some of the character in Circus? Do you keep it, that it keeps some of that raw, you know that rawness to it? Because, you know...
I mean, yeah, I think that circus artists are incredibly resourceful and will make things happen. And that's partly because they always have. And obviously there's a history of circus going back in terms of traditional circus.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is an emerging form that has got a root in a way that maybe contemporary dance did have in ballet. I mean, when I first started out, there was the heading was ballet and there was contemporary dance came underneath it. Whereas now you have dance as the heading and ballet is under it.
Yeah.
So, you know, at what point that transition happened, I don't know. But so circus at the moment, you know, is still in that sort of maelstrom of activity, with still finding its way through.
Can we just think about the training at the moment and just and the training that's going on in the UK? I mean, you know, in terms of dance at the moment, you know, there's been all kinds of and you know, people stating that the training in the conservatoires, you know, the choreographers want to go to Europe to bring top level dancers in, and I just, you know, we can talk about that, but in terms of from a circus point of view, what would you say that the main differences between the training, say in France, in terms of training circus artists compared to the UK, main differences, would you say? Okay,
at the risk of being shot down.
Who's going to shoot you down?
I think that what we could learn from Europe and from especially France, where they are 15 or so, 20 years ahead, is the idea of giving artists, circus artists, the tools with which to create shows. So it's not just about leaving circus school with an act. It's about being able to create a show and be a maker. I mean, obviously there's some artists who will never be makers, they will just be performers, but there are, I think, being able to really push out those possibilities of creators and makers. And I think partly that's to do with the fact that in France they have a 4-year course, so you do 3 years of training, and the 4th year is where you then spend that year creating a show which then tours to all the big theatres. So that 4th year is actually about using the 3 years and developing a show with a recognised director, but the skills that that director brings is about how to be in a company, how you work in a sort of company setup. It's not just about learning your act and the Déda. It's about understanding about how to create a show.
Can I say something?
Yes.
It continues on from that, and the fact that in France, as a professional artist, you can show that you've done contracts, you've worked for this amount of the year, then you're actually paid for creation time. Like a social security, but it's not like a good job. It's actually accepted that as an artist you need that time to develop and create, and you can't be working and performing all the time, which is a totally political thing that we don't have here at all. But that is why, I mean, they were ahead anyway, and they will continue to stay ahead. And companies like, for instance, Generating Company, who started over here, then move and base themselves over there because the actual conditions for being artists are just so much better.
That's called the intermittent, just so everyone knows, it's called the intermittent status. And what you have to do is you have to get contracts that show you've been in employment for, I think, nearly 2 years. So in that 2 years you have to somehow live. And then when you prove that you've had those contracts, you can get intermittent status, and then it's like artist dole, I suppose is the way of saying it, isn't it?
I think it's indulgent.
No, but
and I think that funding environment makes a very, very big difference. And I suppose one of the other differences that's interesting, building on what Rachel is saying, is that I think in the UK there are fewer directors, really, in circus who have specialised in circus. And in that way it is in its infancy. So where you have whole schools in dance or programs that are dedicated to choreography and people who have kind of really established that as a career path, you don't really have that so much in circus. So what you do is get our students forming their own companies together, and there's less of that anyway, but you get students forming their own companies, circus companies, and then they self-direct. But they don't necessarily have the tools to direct with a lot of depth. And so their skills are great, although even there I think there's massive need for the UK to be developing more skills. Yeah. I would say, yeah, definitely technique. But because there's not really this whole wealth of directors and networks of them, it's almost like that people are kind of cast at sea and kind of searching for their voice, searching for how do they put a performance together, and it's why when someone like Ben Duke rises, everyone goes nuts, and it's why we've been talking about him non-stop today. It's because he's so unique in the UK, whereas in France, there's,
he's quite unique in the dance sector, because he's one of only very few people who probably bases the start of his practice on narrative.
Yeah,
so
that's a really interesting
his next piece of work, which we've seen like Paradise Lost, is actually, I would technically say, not a dance. I would say it's technically not a dance show. It's probably more along the physical side of theatre practice, but I would still class it as a movement. I put it all under movement. Anything that moves, to me, is the same practice.
But there's definitely room for somewhere in some institution, education institution, to develop directing for this area of work.
Because I think that Claire and I have spent a lot of time just debating, our degree here, our BA Honours Dance degree, what is the USP? As Déda's changed, the degrees come on, the University of Derby's come on, we've got a programme leader now, and it's what is the opportunity in the UK? How do we make something that is truly leading?
Well, I would look at other models and look at the
Abroad?
examples. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we were talking earlier on about it. So in Tilburg in Holland, they've got a sort of unusual setup there, which they've got just like sort of humanities department, and students can cross over. So you could be studying architecture, but you could do a module in circus, or you could be studying circus, and you can go and learn from the architect. And that's actually, if you're looking at the idea of volume and space and designing in terms of that three-dimensional forms. And then also DOCH, which is in Stockholm. They have a very interesting course there. And in fact, there's two UK artists now moved over there. One is Jean-Paul Zaccarini, that some of you may remember from his, with Flick. They had I can't remember what it's called now, but they did rope work. Well, he is now professor of circus, professor of circus at DOC in Stockholm. And then Jonathan Priest, thank you, from Bristol. He's also over there. He spent years commuting to teach and has now, I think, moved there. So you think, well, why are these, top dogs that we've got leaving? So that sort of, I would go to them and I'd go and talk. I'd bring them here and I'd say, tell us what to do. Yeah. Then there's the Lido down in Toulouse as well. I was saying as well that if you sit in a watch a show, you can spot they were trained at the Lido. And the reason is they've got such incredible sensitivity and a knowledge of how to communicate and how to tell a story. And it's because the leaders of that circus school at the Lido are the most fabulous artists. And so there's these practitioners and artists in charge of the course. And you think, well, that feeds through. If the sort of most creative minds are at the top of the tree at the school, then that filters down. So, forget the bit. Yeah.
We're going.
DOC in Sweden.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that. I think that's a real lesson to learn.
I think we're well placed to take that forward. Actually, I mean, Stephen and I talked about, and with Claire, what we wanted to do with the BA dance first of all.
Yes.
And then the USP for Déda as having aerialists and circus as part of the company USP. That there's now opportunity to build the next stage, which would be to have contemporary skills. We're not allowed to use the word training, but a degree programme, and it could be that it's a master's, because in the UK what we need to be aware of is the funding mechanisms. And in order that students can actually draw down and access funding, we could make a programme that they begin as a BA, but it runs through the final year, is the master's, and that then takes them into industry.
I don't know, having been a student, I know this is a reputation. I know that England, first of all, the fees compared to anywhere else in Europe are much more expensive, and the reputation of, I'm just talking for Circus, but I know that the reputation of the school has been, people from Europe judge on what's coming out of the school, and I know that England is more known for having like just acts or people that work on the more commercial side, so cabarets and stuff like that. So the school is not really rated as like there's like companies that come out there that are really touring around the world and stuff like that. So the students, I know that definitely England is not on the top, so it's not attracting all the students from all over Europe, whereas Doc or any of these places, also because it's free, like they have much more application of like people that have much stronger skill from the start actually.
But what I would say, because I was involved with the Circus space, as I was saying, right from the beginning of their degree programme, is it gets better and better every year. I mean, you would not have believed who they took on their first year of the degree. I mean, just all that. So it comes from being in a place of being very behind to start off with, and it takes time. I mean, it's going to take time because it's a French school, and it is getting better and better.
I think it is getting better and better, and there is always a risk within this country of not attracting the best talent to teach. And it's about how we hold on to that talent.
The best talent to teach.
Getting the best teachers. So we don't have them right now.
No, we lose
We lose them. And part of the reason for that is, say, for a teacher who is very good, they can go and set up their own little business where they're teaching people privately, and they make 5 times, 6 times, 7 times as much as they can as a teacher in a school. And so then it's looking at, well, what other sort of incentives are there? And I don't know in other schools across Europe about how to hold on to them.
That is also part of the food chain, because you need the small Saturday morning and after school clubs with Circus, because that's what Jacques Lang in France did in the 70s, was open up this opportunity. So instead of going to taekwondo or ballet or swimming or whatever, you could also go to Circus after school. So I think that we do need that. That's part, that in terms of the food chain of making awareness and it being, an acceptable, starting off as a hobby that then could lead into.
I think as long as the institutions are holding on to the best talent.
No, I would agree with that as well.
I think just bring it back to Déda. I mean, Claire, do you want to just talk a little bit about our academy? And I mean, for me, it's that thing about the courses, it's about the training, but it's about employability, and it's about what are the opportunities now in the UK to be employed, and where does the outdoor sector fit into that? Is it just about, it's not as just simple as about you come through dance training, you join the Richard Olsen company and you're there for, it's not like that anymore, and it is that broader, portfolio skills that is needed for employment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that's what we'll start with looking at our community programme and how we can enable young people to taste what it's like to be a contemporary circus artist. So setting up the juniors and youth acrobatics classes that run here, and the aerial classes. They've consistently performed really well as a kind of community offer, and we're at the point where we're probably going to offer an advanced juniors and youth aerial class coming in September. We've already been doing that for a year, so we've put young people through that programme and they've done exceptionally well. They're the people that then we want to steer into the FEHE routes. So I do think that in terms of dance, I mean, that's what we've been doing since we obviously we do that really well, and we've produced some really amazing dance artists through our academy. I'm really interested in how we now produce dance and contemporary circus artists through our academy, and how we actually give young people both sets of skills. And is it possible? And is it asking too much? And what sort of model is that? Where are the models, or are we actually just kind of doing our own thing? So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's almost with the degree course. We've got dancers on our degree course. They came because they wanted to dance, and now we're throwing sort of aerial and acrobatics at them, and they're dealing with it. But it's quite a shock to their system, isn't it, Alice? It's quite
I think for me, in terms of this sort of discussion, it's the quality of the training. So if you're training them to do dance and circus skills, how good are they going to be if all that time is on two different disciplines? So for me, it's still having the quality, if that's something that wants to go ahead. Or is it you're a dancer, but you've got these additional skills at maybe the level that we just saw today that would enable you choreographically, or that you're a circus artist that has got some dance skills that will help you create. I struggle to see training working to get you to be a fantastic, like you two, and like Jorge, all in one package.
That's quite a silo mentality. I mean, that seemed very. I guess my question is, you said it. What are you training to be it, i.e. the summit? And my question is, does this need to change?
Yeah, because if you get a job now with all of the major dance companies that are employing the majority of freelance dancers, so we're looking at Two Faced and Motion House and Chameleon as examples, all require people to have circus. Motion House, you have to have a certain amount of circus skills, because I saw Broken at BD, and it required probably more circus than dance. Two Faced require all of their dancers to be able to perform outdoor shows, so you have to be able to go outdoors, but you never study how to move from being in a studio with a dance floor to being on a gravel that's got finger holes and carpet. So I think for me, what Stephen says is right. I think this thing at the top, that it needs to be, you're a performer in my eyes, and that's how I kind of see whether our programme will go as Déda's performance programme will not be based about dance and circus, it will be based about movement practice, and whatever fits in that will go there. That's the training.
I definitely agree, and I think it's brilliant if you can really multi-skilled. My thing is the time.
Yeah.
So maybe you can do more training, maybe you can start younger, I don't know.
Yeah, that's where the youth training comes in.
Exactly.
And you do have to reach quite a good standard now to get on certainly to a circus course. And so before you go, so there has to be some of that training before. And I think, imagine in America, when you see these American dancers, so you think you can dance. And then they're also amazing gymnasts. I think it's about getting the people who will go and take all the people who have the talent to learn it as well.
And we also have some problems in our education system with the reduction in status of the arts, and dance is declining at GCSE level, the EBAC. There's some really big mountains declining. I think Déda has a role to play in terms of providing an alternative for cultural entitlement in dance and in the other areas. So, because young people aren't going to get it in school anymore, there's just dance teachers are losing their jobs. It's and I know that's not necessarily for this debate, but it's got to be noted that that's what's happening to dance, and that's an established sector.
And I suppose it's interesting with circus, because I know that there's some aerialists, they've been training years, they've specialised in being aerialists, and then they're going out and selling themselves in the corporate world and getting their bread and butter, and then complaining about some dancers who have done a four-day course in silks, who are trying to compete with them, who don't know about the rigging, who don't have that background, and feeling like, but I mean, it is interesting about employability, that I think if a dancer has that underneath them, then the flip side is, with circus artists, I think really the bottom line is your technique. You need to have your skills at excellence, in order to be selling your discipline. Because what's interesting with the UK versus many other countries is we don't tend to get two disciplines here. Whereas some of the other schools, you know, they'll train, so we do hand-to-hand, and if we were somewhere else, we might also do, I don't know, I might do an aerial apparatus, and JD might do steer wheel, and then you've got all of these different...
And is that because there's more hours in the day?
But yes.
Yes. Whereas in England
they structure
it much shorter
days.
days.
And I think that's the problem also with
Yes.
dance. I think BAs are the top of the education system. In top, I mean, is the latest one. But what has happened over the last 18 years of the life of a future performer? While, for example, in Spain, people start dancing when they are 19 years old, 6 hours a day. While here in this country, I find it very, very difficult. You have the CAD systems, and then you have other programs, but they are very, very reduced amount of times. And it's a skill, it's a craft that it takes, according to TED Talk, 10,000 hours. So to get to 10,000 hours, you have to do lots of hours. So my question here would be, can houses like Déda or producing companies like Crying Out Loud is a place for, and I'm going to use a very controversial word, for elitism in the early practice? And elitism, I'm talking about 20, 30 hours a week before arriving to a BA. Is there a possibility to open something like that at all, at some point?
Because what is the CAT doing then? What does the CAT, you know, the CAT's remit, and that's the Centre of Advanced Training. There's one in that, I don't know if there is one in Circus. Is there?
There is.
The NCCA have got a CAT.
Yes.
But in terms of hours a week, I think it's 10 hours a week or something.
But how would that work, Chris?
Well, the 10,000 hours that you're referring to, I use as an opening for all of our undergraduates when we welcome them into the College of Arts. And one of the things we inculcate is that you need to have undertaken 10,000 hours of practice, whatever that practice is, and that can vary in the College of Arts from being a ceramicist through to being a fine artist, to being a performer, to being a musician, or a filmmaker. And it's really important to recognise that in a BA structure, the purpose of the training in the UK, in good establishments anyway, is to give the students the sense of their independent study and their self-directed motivation. So there is absolutely no reason why a student studying at BA couldn't undertake those hours of practice, as they do in conservatoires, but it does require the individual to be motivated and hungry to do that. And that's the key. At the moment, what a number of people have talked about is the ecology of getting those young people through to be thinking like that. And that's where Claire's brought up the academy. Déda doing it for dance, so there needs to be a circus, or I'd rather say contemporary circus, similar pattern to give that means of opportunity. And then you could create the ecological system for that to occur.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, so you're dying to get in.
I think having been again on the program, what students have been
not here,
but finding difficult in England, and I think that's what most of the people that come from Europe, and then when we come in the system in England, we've been frustrated with the fact that it's quite strict. And the thing is, like, there's a lot of health and safety and things where school, you can't have the keys of the school to come in the evening, you can't train after hours, and then there's a lot of difficulty to get, no, I'm sure, I don't know about here, but I know that I know that it's definitely something that people find difficult. Like there's a lot of restriction, I would say, that you don't have as much in Europe, which is a bit more slack of like, if you want to try the apparatus, you just do it, and kind of someone who's going to help you is going to stay around. But in England, it's much more like you haven't been trained to do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And there's a lot of frustration around that thing. No, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I'm saying my institution.
No, I think
that I've been
in
through.
terms of the logistics and the practicalities and the health and safety side of it. You know, we've been trying to set up an aerial practice session on a Sunday morning for about a year now, but it's so hard to get those measures right about allowing people to come and practice and supervise, and you know, who does it and who doesn't do it, and you know, it's I suppose it's a little bit of reticence and fear around that because we're not used to that culture. We are the dance, certainly.
I mean, the other thing is that's interesting that leads on from that is the fact that we, with Circus Evolution that I was talking about earlier on, one of the things that we have is outreach activities, so that alongside the shows there are other activities. In fact, Nikki and JD have delivered some workshops with the Berlin Methodical Troupe Tour last year. The idea of going out into schools and other groups to sort of offer activities and workshops and so on and so forth. And we want to do that in all the towns and cities that we go to. But we have difficulty with finding local artists to actually deliver those workshops. And the thing that we found is that some local artists don't want to teach in the way that would suit this particular program, for example. And so that's quite interesting, that there's in terms of teaching, you know, where are we in terms of training our teachers to deliver this type of work, whether it's circus or dance.
Jackie, do you want to come in on that?
Just going back a little bit, and it does fit in with I think what you were saying as well about the whole elite side of training. It's exactly the same as you train a gymnast or you train a ballet dancer. I mean, my son does elite gymnastics. He was doing 30 hours a week from a very young age. And, you know, it's the same for ballet. They go to White Lodge and they, you know, they're there, they're doing ballet all the time. Where circus in this country, kind of where the contemporary circus kind of came from, really was much more the hippie juggler scene. And so there's much more in it, and this is not wrong, and there's still youth companies who are working like this, where it's very inclusive, and it's an alternative to doing competitive sports. That actually this is something that everyone, you know, it's for everyone can have a go at it, and it's not, and so there's still a lot happening of that side, and it fits in with the way you may be saying how people want to teach, but not everybody wants to go, right, okay, we're training people here in the hope that we will bring out some very polished professional circus artists. A lot of people still want to do it on that more, just say hippie type, but it is, you know, a more inclusive sort of thing, but it is for everyone. You know, which in a way is good because, you know, even when you train people heavily, they're not all going to make it as professionals. But when you train all these people, you are creating a new audience for circus. And they will come back to circus and they'll come and watch those people who become professionals. So it's difficult. Yeah.
Thank you, Jorge. Were you going to?
I think it's true, but I think it shouldn't be either or. In the community-based experience, the amazing experience of being a performer and a dancer for 6 hours a week, with the elite of being training 30, 40 hours. And I think it's something that we need to push as a performing arts industry for people to understand that it's not either or, it's and.
Yeah, I suppose the elite needs to be there to pull it up because, so I was a gymnast in the States and I used to train 4.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. I would leave school early to go do it. And that was my background, and it meant getting into circus. I've only been doing circus about 4 years, 5 years, and it means it was easy. And if I meet someone who has a kid who's really interested in becoming an acrobat, I say, be a gymnast. Don't go to a circus school. Don't go to a community circus project, because that, I mean, it's great and inclusive and lovely. Or if you go, make sure you do the gymnastics on top. Because the gymnastics is going to give you the discipline, the body awareness, everything that you need to have good technique. The rest is wonderful and beautiful. You need to have that good technique.
Then you have people like Isa that was in a company that come from that. So they've done. So she's from Sweden and Swiss. Yeah. Yes. She's done it since she's a kid. And that means that she arrived on the degree at Isaac. She already could do juggling. She had done aerials, blah, blah, blah. So they already have such a background that when she comes in the company, she could do a lot of things. She could offer a lot of things for the company, which is a good strength as well, actually. And she was very technical when she did Isaac then on her silks. but then she could also, like, she was on the floor, she could juggle, she could do, she had this whole array of things that she could do.
So I suppose it is an either or, but I think it's then having that richness to be able to really learn it properly rather than drop in once a week and just do a little bit of juggling.
Okay, so we've got 5 minutes.
I'm just going to add that there is a movement that's gaining traction in education around PE and school sport, which is about introducing circus skills as part of the PE curriculum, which is really exciting because that the kind of traditional education around sports and competitive sport that's not suited to every child, has to be addressed, because if we don't, then we'll continue to have a obesity problem. So I think circus has a way in there, in the way that dancers had a way in, and that's kind of where circus and dance could work together to actually form the sort of ground for developing early intervention in skills.
Thank you. I'm just aware of the time. I kind of just want to just revisit the silo thing and maybe bring in Phil and possibly Becky from the Arts Council here. And it is the thing about thinking in silos, and it's about thinking about categorizing, and the thing about audience development and about how we sell, market to audiences, and that kind of relationship with the way the Arts Council fund in terms of art form. Do you think we've got it right? Do you think that we do think too much in art forms in terms of their funding structure and in terms of the way we sell to audiences, or is it just it is that way because it's the best way?
I'm not going to talk on behalf of the Arts Council because I need them to be my friend. I think in terms of audiences, I mean it's tricky when because quite a lot of the people who are presenting circus at the moment tend to be the dance agencies, and I actually did some consultancy with a circus company once because they had a show that was more dance-based and they couldn't get into some of the agencies. And I was brought on board to actually open those doors for them to go into the dance world, when actually the show was probably more dance than it was circus. So I think, for me personally, what we're going to try to do here is we want, I can see the marketing team glaring at us. We want to I personally want to eradicate all of the labels apart from the children's work for obviously certain reasons that we have to label it as family friendly, so that we just have a programme of physical based work where we talk about all of the work that's presented in the Déda programme as something that involves movement or something physical that instigates a show. So something that you guys might do compared to something that's traditionally seen as quite dancey would just be together with nothing written above it that said what either of the pieces were. It just would be the description of the works. And when you actually fundamentally look at the descriptions of the work, we all talk about circus and dance as physical and raw and visceral, and we talk about it in the same way, you just get different outcomes and expectations. So, for me personally, I would like to just get rid of the labels and keep it together.
Becky, just in terms, if that was our programme, for example, and because Déda is traditionally a dance house, that's what we are, and we've kind of deviated, and and at Arts Council, are the lines blurring, are the edges blurring, and could you talk a little bit about that?
I think London's a bit different, but I think since the Arts Council has been restructured and got a lot of people, we've had to adapt and take on, and things don't sit in art forms so much. I mean, firstly, our relationship manager Circus, yes please, I like that job. I think, for example, in the Midlands, No Fixed Date Company sits with the theatre relationship manager, Déda is with the dance, but obviously that's broader, Outdoor Arts sits with me, and we're constantly having to work together as well. And, applications that we look at, assess, aren't always in our direct art form. So I think we are blurring the lines, especially in the regions. And actually, a lot of the time we do ask quality and audiences is what it's about, rather than art form. And often the cross art form work
is where that's really exciting and where the risk taking comes into it. So, I mean, we've also got areas like digital, which has recently kind of, you know, come to be much more part of artistic practice. So it's another way of how we work, really. So I wouldn't want people to be put off and to feel that they have to be labelled, but unfortunately, process and need to capture data in terms of actually when you have to input stuff online in an application means that you do have to select an art form. And you know, so it's interesting because some of that perhaps could be lost, but I'm not sure. I think it's a bit of there's pros and cons, isn't there, to everything.
How is also to do with audiences and how we, you know, how Déda's been long-standing at presenting dance for so long, but how do we get those people who would traditionally come to a dance show and then the people who, because of your wonderful work with Stephen, come to the circus work, how do we get the people to take the opportunity to see both? And I think that breaking down the actual labels will make that an easier transaction. So I did work on a project once where there was a program of work, and it was theatre, dance, circus, everything was in it, and basically the audience got to buy 5 tickets, and the 5th ticket was free if you bought it as a package, and everybody picked either the circus or the dance show. The other 4 were traditional plays that they got to see. So actually there was a full audience of people who would actually have normally gone to a play, sat in an audience because they got a free ticket. Not a free ticket, but if you know what I mean. So, and they would just outstanding. Trickery is a way forward. You know, but it won't be trickery. There will be very, obviously the imagery used, the text used will be very, you'll be able to pick out what that the show is probably not going to be.
Yeah, and I think when it was really powerful and doing some of these workshops that are more community-based and doing some academics and things, is that suddenly people who might not necessarily have gone to see the show do, that suddenly get this interest that's sparked, you know, so a lot of the work that Evolution is doing is so critical to that.
And I know more dancers who buy tickets for circus than dance. Interestingly.
I think it's something key that you said before, is about trust. And I have the feeling that it's about trust in the artist and in the program. So for example, when I go and I see Mind Festival, I don't even see the program because I have trust in the program. And the foresight as an artist is very different, one piece to the other, but I trust it. And I think what you're doing here in Déda is to build that trust. So whatever you're going to bring, your audience are going to think, are going to like it.
Okay, everyone, I'm just really aware that it's